You're listening to Leadership Recalibrated, where we dismantle outdated leadership playbooks and explore the new way to lead. I'm Lori Lalonde, founder of Her Executive Ascent, and I created this podcast because I was tired of hearing the same recycled advice about what it takes to be a good leader. You know the scripts: be more confident, lean in, develop executive presence. But what if those scripts were written for a leadership model that no longer works? What if the future of leadership looks less like commanding authority and more like strategic influence, emotional intelligence, and authentic power? Each week, we take on the questions most leadership programs avoid, the power dynamics nobody teaches, and the decisions that actually shape your career. This is where you stop following the old rules and start designing the leadership career that fits who you are now and where you're going next. Let's recalibrate. Welcome to this special edition of Leadership Recalibrated. I'm flying solo today. I'm Lori Lalonde, and I am founder of Her Executive Ascent. And as you know, the way that the current corporate playbook is run is not something that I'm a big fan of, and I truly believe we need a new wave of leadership. So I have a story to share with you today about an experience I had recently, which I think we can all learn from. And as well, I shared a question out to my LinkedIn community to receive some feedback on how leaders can show up to support their teams during this time. And I'll share those responses in a bit. First, let's get to that story. So last week, I attended a women's networking event, met a lot of amazing women, made some great connections, and listened to a phenomenal panel of women who were in the C-suite, and they shared their leadership advice, insights that they had about what it took for them to get to where they are today, and then also forward thinking, sharing their guidance for women that are on that same path. Near the end of the panel, the facilitator asked a very important question. She asked, what do the leaders see or need to see in a woman in order for them to sponsor her? Because as we know, women are over-mentored and under-sponsored, and that makes a big difference. Women are told time and time again all of the things that they need to do to fix themselves or to show up differently. But when it comes to having an advocate for you, a champion for you in the rooms that you're not in, it's very rare to see women's names being put forward in those rooms to have the sponsorship. And that's why it matters, because it matters for promotions, it matters for salary reviews, it matters for bonuses, it matters for everything. And it matters because that brings your visibility in leadership to a different level that you don't have access to. So one of the senior leaders mentioned that in order for her to feel confident in sponsoring a woman for a promotion or anyone, they would need to not just work their 9 to 5, that was table stakes, but they also needed to work evenings and weekends. They needed to be putting in 80 to 100 hours a week to show their commitment. That didn't sit well with me, and I can tell you that didn't sit well with any other woman in the room. So I raised my hand as soon as the floor opened to questions, because we all know I love asking the hard questions. And I stood up, introduced myself, but then also shared that, hey, I spent the last 30 years in corporate. I went through the same corporate climb that you did, and I worked those hours at multiple different companies. And it didn't result in the outcome that I was expecting. I didn't get the visibility. I didn't get the promotions. I didn't get the big raises or the big bonuses. Actually, it wasn't until 20 years into my career when I landed at Microsoft that they quickly saw the impact that I had. My manager quickly saw what I could do, how I was contributing to the team and the overall business. And he advocated for my promotion pretty quickly. That took 20 years. And I wasn't working 80 to 100 hours there. So I did share, hey, as I was coming up through corporate, raising 2 children, living paycheck to paycheck, putting in those hours, I didn't reap the benefits, but my male colleagues did. And I was just pigeonholed. I was too good at my job to promote. And so I would have to self-promote by going to another company, which would then result in a bigger, base salary and bigger bonuses. And that's how I drove my career, because that was the only way that I was going to reach my end goal of, getting from junior to intermediate to senior to lead to consultant. all of those things. And I did share very plainly in the room, all of that time, all of that effort wasn't worth it. I ended up sicker. I see other women in the industry who are sick and worn out at those levels and stressed. And the minute a company feels like that they've squeezed all of your time and energy and experience from you, you are then discarded and replaced very easily. So I didn't buy into this notion that just because we did it, this is what we need to see the next generation doing. And I challenged her and asked her actually, rather than asking the next generation coming up to do or telling them that's what they need to do, what can we do as leaders in the stage of our careers that we're in? What can we do to change that, to make it a healthier working balance? Because the current systems, the current structures, they don't work for anybody right now. And it is impossible for the next generation to even fathom having a family in the current economic climate when they can barely support themselves and they don't have the trust in organizations that they will have a long-term career there, because every day it feels like their employment is constantly at risk. We are in this economy of constant layoffs, mass layoffs, and the reasons don't add up. I digress. So, needless to say, there was a lot of head nodding in the room. The woman that had shared that statement expressively disagreed with me, which was fine. I mean, we are here to have a conversation. We're not here to agree with each other. I share leadership advice for the future, while other leaders share it based on what their experience was or what they want to see from others. I envision a, a future in corporate where there is a healthier balance and where it is more sustainable and human focused, so that people feel that it is a natural add in and a value add to their lives rather than taking away their energy, taking away their motivation, taking away their passion for the work. People just want to do good work at the end of the day and get paid for it and pay their bills and have a successful career. But we can't be squeezing them like they're sponges to get every drop out of them, because then they are no good to the company at that point, and then they're just inevitably discarded when they no longer perform at that same level, which is unsustainable for everyone. What are ways that we can change the current corporate structure to make it so that it does not force us to contort ourselves into an unsustainable working structure or model, but actually contorts and shapes and bends and is flexible to allow people to do their best work in the way and in the place that they know how. Simple. So that was an interesting event. I really enjoyed it. I've been to more events since. I absolutely love that community. I feel like there's so much to learn from each other as we come together to share our experiences and insights, and then understand the challenges or, what the next generation is experiencing as they're entering the workforce. Because at the end of the day, my goal is to make it easier for them, not harder, not the same. I want to make it more human, and I want to make it easier for them to be able to have a successful career rather than just go through the same punishing obstacle course we did growing up, as we were building our careers. That's just, we have to put that aside. So in line with that, I mean, and this isn't related. I did post a question to my community weeks earlier, but it really ties into the same thread because this is a topic that is near and dear to me. So a few weeks ago, I asked my LinkedIn community a simple question. With all the global instability, economic turmoil, political turmoil, everything that's going on, what is one concrete thing you wish the leaders in your organization would do right now to better support their people? I provided an anonymous form to give people the space to be honest, and they were. They were honest, they were vulnerable, they were bold, and I really enjoyed reading them, but I also acknowledge we have a long way to go in order to show up as the leaders that our teams need us to be. So today I'm sharing some of the responses I received and what I think leaders need to hear right now. This one's for the people doing the work and the leaders who are brave enough to listen. Let's get into it. All right. So we are living through quite an interesting time. It is not a good time, and I think we all feel it, even though we can't really name it. It's just everything feels very tumultuous. Maybe I don't even know if that's a good word for it because that's what, like I said, we can't really name it. But we have the economic uncertainty. We have the mass layoffs from companies that we once thought were untouchable, that were super profitable, still are super profitable, but conducting those layoffs anyway. That's another podcast episode we'll touch on. But it feels like for those of us that are just trying to live and make it day by day, the ground keeps shifting beneath our feet. And that is frustrating. So, somewhere in the middle of all of that, people are still showing up to work. They're still showing up on their video calls, whether it's Zoom or Teams. They're still delivering, they're still performing, and they're still connecting with their teams. But what's the cost? What's the cost of people acting like it's business as usual in this not so normal time that we are living in? Response number one, this is around corporate social responsibility. This response actually had me thinking for quite some time after I read it. It gave me a new perspective on how to challenge organizations even further on what accountability and responsibility looks like. So the response was seeing leading world companies conducting mass layoffs over the last couple of years got me thinking about whether it's time we held them accountable for the negative economic and social repercussions of such actions. We hold companies accountable for environmental responsibility, but why not start talking about social responsibility as well? So let that sit for a second. And I mean, I know I took a minute to think about it, and it's true. We've heard the corporate pledges around sustainability, the sustainability pledges, reducing carbon footprint for environmental impact, but where's the framework for the social devastation that are caused by mass layoffs, for the families who are disrupted and the communities that are hollowed out, and the mental health toll that it's taking to be thrust into uncertainty, this constant state of uncertainty day in and day out? We talk about corporate social responsibility, but too often it looks like charity initiatives and volunteer days, but not really accountability for how decisions at the top impact people in their day to day lives. So, this response is asking leaders and all of us to expand the definition of corporate responsibility. And I agree with it. I really think that we need to put that at the center, and companies need to be held accountable for the negative social impacts and devastation that they cause through these layoffs that, frankly, cannot be accounted for. I mean, there's for companies that are making trillions of dollars, they're still profitable with all of the people that they had. There's no excuse for those layoffs other than corporate greed. And that is becoming a real reason people are disengaged and demoralized. So rather than, having the platitudes on the wall, it would be great if every major organization had a social impact statement. For every project, every decision that's made, what's the social impact of that project, of that decision? And what if boards were asked not just to think about what does this do to our margins, but what does this do to our communities? I mean, that's a conversation worth having, don't you think? I think leaders, it really means it's time for you to start asking the harder questions, not just of the company, but of yourself and how you show up as a leader day in and day out and what you're willing to stand for. Response number two, simple communication. So this next response was to the point, and I think in many cases, the most powerful thing a leader can do is something that is not really complicated at all. So the response was simply communicating with employees can offer that support. If a leader recognizes a distraction, holding a what's on your mind meeting and discussing what is in everyone's control can ease it. The leader can set the tone with an opening like, I've observed and heard many of you talking about X, and it sounds like you have concerns. Let's talk about what's on your mind, and I'll address what I can about how X impacts our team. That's it. That's what leadership looks like. Notice what this response does. It acknowledges the reality of what we're experiencing today. It acknowledges that we are not living in normal times. We're not pretending that everything is okay. This is where the leader does not pretend that everything is business as usual. And there's so much power in a leader who says, I see it, I see you, I hear you. Let's talk about it. And let's work on this together. We're here to support each other. That's it. That's what it's about. So really, really understanding how to not overcomplicate the message, but just hold space for people to feel the way they feel, to share their concerns or their fears, and then just say, we're here to support each other. We've got this. And if someone is really struggling and it's not as simple as saying, we're here, we've got this, share the information to the employee resources they have available for therapy, have them speak with HR. Maybe they need to take an extended leave. They're not always thinking about those in the moments. They don't have their benefits they don't have all of their benefits memorized or what's applicable to them in any specific moment, especially when they're in that moment of turmoil and or down a deep dark hole. They just need somebody to reach down and grab them and pull them up. And the best thing you can do is share and remind them of the employee benefits and resources they have, and that they have access to therapy, that they have access to a medical leave if needed. If it's going to upend your product roadmap, so be it. That person's health and well-being is far more important. Plan better next time. Response 3, trust through follow through. This one is about trust. And as you've heard me say in a podcast that I was on, I believe it was the Inside Out Engineering podcast with Nikki McGinn, trust is broken in the corporate world. Employees no longer trust the organizations they work for. That trust is lost. And once it's lost, it's incredibly hard to rebuild. So this response says, the action I'd want most from leaders is simple but significant. Close the gap between what leaders say about employee well-being and what they actually invest in. That looks like salaries that keep pace with inflation, paid time off that people don't feel guilty taking, and remote work flexibility that's treated as a permanent benefit rather than a reluctant concession. Trust is built through follow through, not messaging. I'm going to repeat that. Trust is built through follow through, not messaging. I want that on a poster in every C-suite in the world. We are in an era where corporate jargon about well-being is just not landing. People are exhausted by it. They're not buying it. They've heard the speeches. They've seen the Instagram posts about our people are our greatest asset. They've watched those same assets get laid off via email. They've been told they can't take paid time off during busy season. It's just there's never time for them to exercise their PTO. And hot flash. Yeah, I'm in perimenopause. Hot flash. The PTO, that's part of your compensation package. And you cannot be denied PTO, especially if you will end up losing them at the end of the year because you are not allowed to carry over PTO in some situations. So you need to take that PTO. And even if a company offers unlimited PTO, there's a baseline minimum by law you are allowed to take. It is not carte blanche for them to say, now's not the time, but you have unlimited PTO, so maybe another time. That is your time. You have worked for it. You have accrued that time. Take the time. And again, the whole thing with people are amazing, that we are inclusive, but yet we're returned to office now. So you all have to be at your desks, in seats, no matter where you live. So there is a disconnect, right? It is really like there is this cognitive dissonance between what leaders are saying and what the company or what the company values are sharing on a wall and on a plaque on their website. Bring it more in aligned. And to bring it more aligned means the leaders need to start living those values, need to really understand what it means to practice those values in action and really make it a reality, because your employees are not naive. And the gap between what you say and what you do, that's eroding trust at a rate that no engagement survey can capture. So here's the challenge. What would it look like to close that gap this quarter? Even if it's one thing. Pick one thing and do it. So have you instituted a hard return to office? What would it look like to go back to maybe a more flexible model so that people can work in the way that works best for them, in the place that works best for them, instead of having to commute 2 hours each way every day? Now, you don't have to overhaul everything, but just pick one thing. that you can do that matches the commitment that the company espouses. Now, if you've told your team well-being matters, when's the last time that you encouraged them to take time off and approved it without conditions, unconditionally? And if flexibility is a value of the company, is it written into policy, or is it just based on who the manager of the day is and how they feel? And if salaries haven't kept up with the pace of inflation, that might be a discussion worth raising to the executive leadership team. And if you are in the executive leadership team, why are the salaries of the people below you not keeping up with inflation? Like, what's the honest conversation that has to happen here in order to ensure that the company is living true to their values? The last response: stop pretending. Stop pretending like the situation in the US is normal. I read this and I just nodded. I am Canadian. I am based in Canada. We are impacted indirectly by what's happening in the US, but by no means are we living what many people are experiencing in the US that are impacted by some of the policies happening there. So that that's exhausting. I'm exhausted and I'm not living it. I can't even imagine what's happening for the people that are there and living in that kind of chaos. The political, economical, social chaos, and then having to go to work pretending everything is normal, go into a meeting room where no one mentions it. It's business as usual. These are not normal times, and it's not business as usual. And everything that's happening at work feels trivial in comparison to what their day-to-day experiences are. They're genuinely afraid, day in and day out, living in fear of everything that's happening there, or something that's happening there, because it impacts them in one way, shape, or form. Now, pretending it's normal doesn't make people feel better. It makes them feel like they're not seen. It makes them feel like they have to mask not just their personalities, but their humanity. Now, I'm not saying every leader needs to become a therapist or turn every all hands into a processing session, but there is a meaningful difference between a leader who acknowledges the reality and one who ignores it. The leader who holds space and the one who just crowds the room. I mean, it's so important to just acknowledge that this is a very tumultuous time. And what does that acknowledgement look like for your team? Well, it sounds like, I know there's a lot happening in the world right now. I want you to know it's okay to not be okay. We're going to keep doing great work, and we're going to take care of each other while we do it. If you're struggling, please reach out to me, to HR, to someone you trust. We mean that. Acknowledgement doesn't require you to have all of the answers or any of the answers. It just requires you to be present, to bear witness to that person's journey, their pain, their challenges. And it requires a leader who's willing to be human first. So, what do these 4 responses have in common? It's that people want to be seen by the organizations they work for, by the leaders who make the decisions that impact their daily lives. They want leaders who are honest, present, and accountable. You don't have to be perfect, but you just got to keep it real. That's something I really like to do. I'm so for real. But no, no leader is perfect. I've made my fair share of mistakes. I continue to make mistakes, but we learn from them. We grow from them. We acknowledge them. None of us are perfect, but we just need to know how to show up for others and be self-aware in that moment. I have a challenge for the leaders listening to this. I want to thank you for being here first and foremost. Thank you for being open to listening to this. I know it's not easy, but I also want to ask you one question. What is one thing you can do this week, just one, to better support the people you lead? It doesn't have to be big gestures. It doesn't have to cost any money. It just might be a conversation, but a real one. So start there. Thank you so much to everyone in the LinkedIn community who responded to my post. Your honesty and your courage in speaking up matters. And thank you all for listening to the very end. If you have taken any of what I've shared today and put it into practice, come back and share it in the comments. I definitely would love to hear about it. I'd love to learn from it. I think that we all can, do more to show up for each other day in and day out. There's always something that we can do better. So thank you all, and I'll see you in the next episode. The leadership advice that got many women this far will not necessarily get them where they want to go next. This phase of your career is not about working harder. It's about working strategically, by deciding which rules still apply and which ones you are finally ready to outgrow. If this conversation resonated, stay with us, subscribe to the podcast, and join me here every Sunday for new episodes. And if it gave you language for something you've been carrying quietly, share it with another woman in your network who needs to hear it too. Until next time, lead with intention, question everything, and change the rules for the better. I'm Lori Lalonde, and this is Leadership Recalibrated.